Hey, Emily, we are so excited to have you on the Sisterhood podcast today.
Absolutely. Well, I am glad to be here. So thanks for having me.
Yeah, so you're a Northwest girl, which is always just right here in my heart. I just
hmm
love that we're fellow Northwesters. So, where do you live? Who
Yes.
do you live with? All that.
Yes, I am currently hail from Gig Harbor, Washington, so south of Seattle. Grew up in the Pacific Northwest up on Mercer Island, but went to school back east. But yes, I'm a Pacific Northwest girl at heart. So came home, met my husband on a blind date. We now have four children. So we have four boys. They are 12, 10, 7, and 4. And I'm about to broach the homeschooling operation, which will be very exciting. But little mini history, just we only moved here in October. We actually, for the last 2 years, lived essentially on the University of Washington campus, like right behind Frat Row. We were neighbors and worked a lot with college students and postgrads. So that's kind of where I'm immediately coming from. And a lot of the conversation today will be based in a lot of that experience. So.
Yes, so tell people what you do professionally.
Yeah, so I have an academic coaching business and started about 10 to 12 years ago, actually 12 years ago, and essentially started with tutoring high schoolers, but realized very quickly because of our background in young life that tutoring in and of itself was not enough, that students that I was working with, they might have been having issues with math, but I realized if I didn't first ask them, hey, how's home? How's that girlfriend? I know that you just got cut from the soccer team. What's going on in your life? The first 5 or 10 minutes was typically taken up with questions about their life, because if a student is going through a breakup that looks like a mini divorce, they can't learn math or plan for an essay. And so it became this sort of merger of what I understand now as life coaching. It was life coaching meets tutoring. And so we would talk about some things, get a handle, have some words for what emotions they were experiencing. And then I would say, hey, we still have that math test on Thursday. Do you give me permission? Can we switch gears and get that done? Because you're going to feel confident in this area if we don't let everything else fall. And so learning to navigate sort of all those areas of life. And that grew lots of high school students. And then those high school students became college students. And I started working a lot more with college students and a lot of young professionals. And so essentially now what that looks like is I have a handful of high schoolers, mostly college students that I'm doing sort of life coaching, academic coaching with, and a lot of postgrads. My husband and I also get to do a lot of premarital counseling. So we're a lot in that like 18 to 30-ish age group that we're with. And they, yes, it's a lot of excitement. And then this season it's shifted because everyone's home for a long, long time.
Yes.
So a lot of virtual coaching in the midst of screaming children, happily
Well,
screaming children.
yeah. Well, we wanted to have you on because we just feel like this is a really hard thing. COVID is really hard on
Yeah.
college students. I mean, I think any of us who
Yes.
have had that experience of going to college
hmm
at a 4-year university, it is so important. It's so developmental. Who
hmm
you are when you enter, you are not the same person when you leave. It's
hmm
one of the most
It's true.
life changing times and
Yeah.
person
Formative.
changing
Yeah.
times of our lives. Can you speak a little bit to what it really feels like as a college student right now to be in
Mm,
this nebulous COVID where they don't really
yeah.
know what they're doing, what's happening?
Yes. No, I think you you hit the nail on the head. It is a formative, life-changing, person-changing time. And so it's interesting. I've heard a lot of different perspectives, but I think for many students that go the 4-year university route, they're typically coming from places where the next thing has always been laid out for them. They've been students and they know that, then they go to college and if they're athletes, they're doing their athleticism, their play Division I college soccer. So understand that one where you had your sport, your studies, you were making your friends, but it was kind of the next thing in front of you. And suddenly, um, the expectations, everything has been wiped bare. There's suddenly a blank slate in front of them, and nobody really knows the way forward. And it feels very disorienting for parents and students alike. I think there is a spirit of fear that's sort of consuming a lot of people because we were under the illusion that we had control because we at least knew what was next. And I think the illusion has been ripped away, and we all realize actually how little control we have. And that feels like a lot of powerlessness. And what I'm hearing from students, there's a lot of different camps. There are a lot of students that because of this have moved home. And so those that have gone back home, if they've had even a semester of college, but particularly the more you're away from your home, the more when you come home, you are a different person. And your parents and your siblings and everyone sort of, they're only operating from the narrative that they have of you when you were home for all those years. And so I hear a lot of students saying, gosh, it's been so good to be home, but I'm being treated like my high school self, and I'm not her anymore. I'm not him anymore. And when I'm just doing that for 2 months of a summertime, it's one thing because it's maybe easy to just sort of slip back into the old mold, revert a little bit because I know I'm going back to school where I can develop these new friendships, continue to be who I know I'm becoming. And right now you have a lot of students that have gone home and there's a lot of assumptions being made about them. They're getting frustrated. Like, I'm so mad. I just keep getting triggered. This isn't who I am, because they're reverting into old patterns. And so I think it's a both and. I think parents are sort of expecting and treating them as they were when they were 17 even, and a little bit of college. They're individuating, they're beginning to create some of their own boundaries, they're learning who they are, they're making new friends, and they're coming back home and feeling a little bit squished back into an old mold, not quite sure how to break out. And so I think there's some frustration there. One of the big things, one of our first questions we were talking about, what would you say to sort of parents during this time? And I think the theme that I heard is empathy, and curiosity. So if you're a parent and you find you're really at odds with your student, even asking questions, tell me what were some of the most significant things you feel like you've learned about yourself in the last year. As you've been away at college, how did your friendships look different? What do you feel like you learned about yourself? Almost re-getting to know your student, giving them the opportunity to actually be someone different, at least how they're seeing themselves different than who you've experienced them to be, which takes time, which not everyone has, but in some ways we have a lot more of. And so I think a lot of questions and curiosity and sort of allowing yourself to get to know this person again as they're entering your home. Even if they've been there for a while, I wouldn't be surprised, especially now that many are staying at home and doing things virtually. I know a lot of students are not going university, or they're not starting there at least, and they're doing local community college online. It makes more sense financially if they're not getting the whole big college experience. And so kids are home, and in many ways they're actually loving being home. Some are loving that, some are going away and realizing they're very homesick because they've been home for a while. There's a lot of things going on, but I think for parents, just sort of step back and just ask a lot of questions and give space for new responses, and to get to know them maybe in a different way. Yeah.
It's interesting. I have a phrase for that I talk about and that I really try and employ in my parenting, but it's to get to know people in the present tense. So just because we've always known someone doesn't mean we know them in this new phase and stage and season. And so to really, and I think applying that to our college students specifically right now is really important, but just know them in the present tense. What is making them tick right now? What are they excited about? What are the things that are painful for them right now? What are the things they like right now? I mean, just, those basic things that kind of make up who we are in a season.
Yes. And that, I love that. And one of my favorite memes that says, my growth game is strong. Allow me to reintroduce myself. And I just love that, because there's that sense. So getting to know in the present tense. And I think what that does is it moves us out of a reactive state and into a responsive state, where we're responding to the person right in front of us, because it's so easy when we're in fear or in overwhelm. Our minds, our bodies, they just want to save energy. And so we're going to react out of an old narrative. And we need to allow for a new narrative to be formed in this new season. So yes, I love that. Get to know them in the present tense. Mark that down. So good.
Okay. So Emily, let's jump into, here's something I've been hearing a lot of lately is, so students, they've actually gone to college. Parents have gone through that whole thing of like moving them in, they're in their dorm room, they think their kids are starting, and all of a sudden the campus shuts down and now everything's online. And so I think kids are asking, well, should I stay? Should I stay and pay this money when I'm going to be online and I can be doing online at my community college for a fraction of the cost, but now they're moved in, right? I mean, I just feel like there's a lot of change even happening in the present tense, right? So you think you're going, your college says we're open, now we're not. What are some of the pivoting, what's healthy pivoting right now? What does that look like for college students?
Yeah. I mean, I think what's interesting is I think just with classes going online, I mean, the reality is the amount of time you're actually in class each day is not a whole lot in compared to high school, comparison to high school. And so I think there's this sense of, oh my gosh, it's online, I'm not going to have this experience. And while I do understand, fraternities and sororities, I mean, so much has changed. It's not how we expected or anticipated, but there are still people right around us. There is still incredible opportunity just because the programs we were expecting are not being served up to us in the way that they were does not mean that we are powerless in creating experiences. And so I think what I've heard from a lot of people is you can still have a really incredible experience as you actually really look at what's right in front of you. Like, what is right around you? Who is across the hall? Who is in your room? People are still alive and breathing around you and need relationship. I mean, the core of what we need is relationship. And I think one of the themes I've heard from college students a lot is they're feeling very unpursued, right? People are feeling very alone in things. So those that have maybe had a semester at school and then, things shut down and they've gone back, they were just starting friendships. Things don't really solidify till spring. So they're like, wait, I think I had friendships, but I'm not really sure. So they're scared to reach out. The older ones, are going back and it's not how they always experienced it. So that feels disorienting. But I think there's something to be said for really picking up your eyes, asking a lot of questions of what is out of my control. Okay, class not being in presence, and my sorority not looking the same. What is out of my control, but what is in my control? And one young woman who does ministry at the University of Washington campus, she's been working a lot with her students around this, and she just asks them to write a list of 10 things that are life-giving for them. It might be take a walk in the woods, create a space in my room. Maybe it's buy a plant, a candle. I can't control the whole environment of my college, but I can control the environment of my room. Make my bed in the morning. Very simple tasks that move people from a sort of paralyzed state of I'm totally out of control to here are 10 things I can literally choose from that will move me in a direction to get me going. And so, grab a friend and take a walk. Shut down your phone, shut down your computer, and create some spaces. Make a picnic. I mean, there's actually very practical things that even if the world were normal, we would still be doing these things. But I think people are in a very paralyzed state, thinking that I have to wait till something else or someone else initiates because everyone else is shutting down on me. When we do have a lot more power than we realize. So I love that very practical advice, like make a list of 10 things. What's life-giving? What's in your control? And then when you suddenly feel frozen, go back to that list and pick one. Just the act of choosing something, even if it's small, gets us moving in a direction rather than if we're just spinning around, if we're kind of looking at all our options but doing nothing, we essentially spin in circles. But if we at least take a step forward, we have some new perspective as we're looking at our options. So I think that can be really helpful. As far as the, do I go home? Do I stay? I mean, those are big financial, personal questions. There's no blank answer. I was talking to one young woman who is working with college students down in San Diego, and she said, I'm actually really sort of weary of people that are pretending to have answers for everyone, because no one knows what the heck we're doing. And there's actually so much more wisdom in us than we think there is, that we can look at our situation and say, what is healthy for me in my life right now? To slow down and journal. I think one of the things we can do as parents and as mentors is ask questions of students to be able to get them to put their emotions into words, to actually say it out loud, pick it apart, because underlying for most students, there is a fear of some sort in there. What's the fear? Is your fear just that you're not going to make friends? Okay, let's think about what are a few things you can do on that front. Is your fear that you're not going to get the education that you thought you needed in order to get that career that you wanted? Well, there's a lot of opportunity out there to learn and to grow in character and grit, because the one thing the world is really lacking right now is resilience. And if there's anything that this season is going to do is to create some resilience in our young people, to know that they actually have a lot more in them than they think they do. So I think yeah, helping get emotions into words and choosing some practical action steps to go forward as they verbalize whatever fear it is that they're coming up against, so they can experience some overcoming. Yeah, but there's no blanket answers.
There aren't. And that's helpful even for moms to hear,
Yeah.
that what you
Yeah.
decide as a family is going to be good for your family. And your neighbor or your sister may choose something different because circumstances are different for each kid and each
Yes.
school and each living situation.
Really.
And I believe that all of the things you were talking about are life skills that young adults
Yes.
need to have. You said resilience. And it is true that it's it's been a little lacking, it feels like, in the world these days. And so we're all getting a big dose of it now.
Yeah.
And the bright side is that our young adults are going to be going into the world prepared.
Yeah.
They have been able to practice that muscle, and they are continuing to practice it. These skills of flexibility, decision making, all of these are life skills that they're going to take with them. The circumstances are weird. We've never done this before, but a year from now, we're not going to think they're that weird because we will have lived through them.
Yeah, absolutely.
But because they're new and different, it feels weird. One thing I liked that you said was, it seemed like you were kind of giving the message of, it's not necessarily an all or nothing. As you're looking at changes that are coming and what's right in front of you, we sometimes think, okay, we're going to do it extreme this way, or it's going to have to be extreme this way. And when I hear about parents making decisions for this fall about college, it just feels so extreme. But to see if there's a third way in there that can be molded from the things that the student loves and appreciates, and smart, wise things that maybe are financial or maybe are health related, that are specific to that child. I think it's all good, and unfortunately not real clear. It's still not real clear.
It is that, like, yes. And I think that question that is so helpful for me, that my mentor has given me so many times, but just, what is the next right thing? And the next right thing may be a very small thing. And on a random Tuesday, it may be a grand decision. But most of the next right things are a small thing. I wake up in the morning and feeling a little bit lonely. Who can I go after? Instead of, because I mean, the liar is loud, right? And so it's really easy to go in one of those shame spirals of suddenly being like, everyone else knows what they're doing and they're moving forward. You know, I had this last week. I needed to get a desk for a homeschool space. Suddenly find IKEA, Target, all the desks are sold out. And the first voice I hear is, every other mom has got it together. They've all got their home space set up. Like, you're behind, you don't know what you're doing. And I was like, whoa, just sort of overwhelmed, and had to remember, no, I am a joyful, resilient woman. I could put up a card table if I needed. You know, it's not so much about the Pinterest wall, but the environment that I'm creating in my home, that my kids are growing with a spirit of curiosity, that there is peace in our home. You know, I mean, what is it that I can control and not? And so I think identifying those lies that come at us, that cause us to spiral out in shame, because internal conflict leads to external conflict, right? Obviously there's a lot of external conflict, which is causing us to be sort of up in arms, but to realize, like, what is the lie that I'm believing about who God is, about who I am, about who my kids are, you know, that's causing me to act in fear and reactionary thinking, and what is actually true? Like, where have we been resilient? It's been interesting because the students I've found, and some others have confirmed this, the students that are actually thriving the most right now are students that have gone through trauma and have actually gone to counseling in the past, that have some tools, that know what self-care looks like, and they're the ones that are actually caring for their friends. The students that have always been told what to do and had the next right thing are the ones that are floundering the most. And so for those of, you know, for those mamas that are like, oh, my student has had stuff in the past, like, you encourage them, you're like, you have tools, you know how to do this, like, your friends haven't gotten there yet, you get to serve them. And so going back to that kind of the next right thing, it could be as small as, I feel a little bit alone, who's one person I can invite to go on a walk today? That might be the next right thing, and it could pivot your whole day. You know, it might be, gosh, what's a good book that I can read? How can I get outside? I mean, it could be very small. Like we talked about, it could be a larger decision, but most of those are on the tail end of lots of small, good decisions. So yeah, I think asking questions, curiosity.
So where do you see the parents' role in supporting their kids emotionally and where should they step in and where should they not? Where should they be?
Yeah.
Because sometimes college students would rather hear it from someone else than their parents.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
just talk to us a little bit about that.
Yeah.
Obviously the kids need to be supported emotionally right now. What does that look
Yeah.
like for parents and others around them?
Gosh, that is such a good question. And again, it's tricky because every individual parent and child have different relationships. And on various days of the month, that relationship could look different. So,
true.
You might, so I think some of it is being in tune with your student, that when there's, asking the questions, being available, having a lot of empathy, like, man, this is just hard. Like, it's okay to just say it's hard. Or what are you learning right now? Knowing when it's a calm place. And I think it's almost employing like love and logic, but in a 20 something space where you're like, what do you feel like some of your options are? Like, do you want me to brainstorm with you? Even asking permission, you might have some really great thoughts and you could say, hey, I have some ideas. Let me know if you want to hear them, because it'd be interesting to brainstorm with you. I think one of the most empowering things is to give a student an option to actually receive your help, versus like coming in with help. I'm learning this with my 12-year-old, so we're practicing. But I think, asking permission, like, hey, can I brainstorm with you? I'm not sure I have the right answers. Having a lot of humility in the way that you offer things, because ultimately at this age, they need to be owning more and more of their choices. Even if it was your idea, there needs to be at some level where they're like, that's a good idea. Now it's my idea and I'm going to morph it and shift it, and now I can move forward, because they have to take ownership of it at some point in time. And so the first, I think, step through the door is, will you give me permission to offer some ideas? Because they might be like, nope, I just wanted to vent right now. And you're like, all right, awesome. Let me know when you want to chat more. And really putting it on them, and they may or may not come around. That's when you like take a deep breath and wait and listen, and you will be surprised. It will be on a random Tuesday at 11:30 and you're wanting to go to bed, and the student is like,
Yep.
hey, I think it's time to make that decision. You're like, okay, coffee, here we go. So I hear that a lot, that it's when you least expect it. And I know that's for me. I've gotten calls late in the night from young people that are like, hey, I'm ready to move. And you're like, okay, I've just been waiting for this moment. And also really praying for mentors in our students' lives, whether it's an auntie or, someone on campus. Is there anyone else you're talking to about this? You can ask that. Your student well. So hopefully you're thinking through what would be triggering questions. You're not like, it's amazing sometimes where I'll ask my son a question, and in one moment he's like, oh yeah, good question. Other moments he's like, do you think I'm stupid? It's amazing how that just grows with them, evidently. And so that is interesting too, to think, what are questions that could be triggering, that I don't want to come across as condescending. If anything, I want to speak to this young man, this young woman, as an empowered, growing adult who gets to take advantage of, how would I want to be spoken to? How would I want someone to suggest something to me? Because I think we as parents are ever evolving as well, and asking for grace for your kids. Like, hey, I've never done this before either. How would you like me to recommend things to you? I've just done this recently with one of my students and with one of the college girls. How would you like, if I have an idea, how would you like me to present that to you? Do you like it in writing so then you can process it and you're not hearing me? Or do you like it me spoken to you? So that's actually a good question to ask. How does your person receive from you? What's helpful?
I love all of those. Those are all really helpful, and, just general parenting, but and it works. I have done that often, where I say, would you like my opinion on this? And let them choose if they do or they don't. The other thing is, my daughter and I were just having a conversation actually last night. We went out to dinner, and she was talking to me about that very thing, that, how much our relationship changed when we started talking more like equals, just really that empowerment that she feels to make her own decisions. And I just really like that whole thing that you just said. I love it. What about the kids that we see? Maybe we have a college student who is really not wanting to make their own decisions. They're actually tanking a little bit during this time. They feel uninspired. They're getting a little bit lethargic. They're wasting a lot of time, maybe playing video games, or who knows, what they're doing. But what are your suggestions for kids who are actually just really losing motivation during COVID?
Yes. Gosh, that is such a good question, because I mean, motivation is one of those things that can come within. I think it's easy to think that if we nag or shame or invoke fear into our kids, like, if you keep doing this, you're not going to da 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 da. And we move down a road which can be temporarily motivating, but it is not sustaining. Fear is interesting because fear is a good motivator, but it is not a good sustainer of health or growth. And so we need to be careful, what, again, coming back to our own selves, like, what has been healthy for me, what has been unhealthy. We might need some new patterns of even our own self-talk. I think our young people need, and not like blowing sunshine, but really healthy identity spoken to them. And so when I think about my own kids, I mean, almost every time I speak to one of my college students, one of my 20 somethings, the question I'll ask right before, and kind of regardless of where the faith is of the audience that's listening to right now, I really do believe that there is a voice of truth that speaks to all people. And if you tune in and you ask, okay, what would the voice of truth say, right? Jesus says, I am the way, the truth, and the life. And he's for all people. There's such grace that all people, regardless of whether or not you yet have a vibrant relationship with God, if you are in need and you ask, he will answer. Jeremiah 33:3 says, call to me and I will answer you and I will tell you great and unsearchable things that you do not know. And so if you're thinking about your, son in the living room playing all the video games, and you're like, God, what do you want me to know about this young man? When you look at him, what do you see? Not on the outside, because God says he looks at the inward things. And so it's like, man, this is a really technically gifted person. He's actually incredibly connected. Right now he's super lonely. And you begin to come in and, you can speak things over a person, say, I know you're playing video games right now a lot, or maybe I don't know what you're doing right now. It doesn't seem like you're super motivated. It makes so much sense. But this is who I see in you. This is what I know about you from the time you were little. Like, you have been full of joy. You're super creative. You're actually really inventive. And it feels like there's no room to invent right now. Like, I just want to remind you of who you are and leave it there. Because I think kids need to be reminded of who they are, regardless of their behavior. Because if we have a wrong belief about, first of all, who God is, that he's not for us, that he's not with us, if we feel alone in any way, then we begin to have a wrong belief about who we are. I don't have any power. I'm not supported. I'm not encouraged. I don't have what I need. And then our behavior is that the downflow, right? It's kind of out here. And so we can't just try and change our kids' behavior and think that the rest is going to change. They need to know their identity, because if they know who they are, then that's going to begin to shift in how they operate in the world. It's my joy. It's like the heart of what I do as a coach. Like the algebra is just fodder for me getting in and seeing how they're, so often when we're doing math or I'm helping a college student write a paper and I'm like, man, you don't even care about the subject, but here's what I'll tell you. There's gonna be things in your life that you're gonna need to do whether you feel like it or not. And confidence is gonna come from you doing the thing that you don't feel like doing, not from you getting an A. Confidence comes from the grit and the follow through of doing things that are just plain hard. And I know you can do this. So do you want me to help you develop a thesis and then I'll give you 20 minutes and I want you to come back? Or do you want to, give them a couple options, but just remind them that they have the ability to do more than they think, and then be able to say like, hey, I've seen you do this and I know you've talked about this and I remember you getting super impassioned about this. Like, remind them of what they've told you or shown you to be true, and then let them flounder a little and watch, but continue to speak life into these young people because they need it more than anything else.
And then you say, would you be open to me brainstorming with you? And would you like to hear my ideas about what else you could be doing? Yeah.
Would you like?
I think that's true. I jumped to
bite our tongues.
Right. I jumped to
I'm
that.
a fixer. I'm with you. Yeah.
And when it's my own child, I feel the freedom to say things that maybe I wouldn't say to another child. And so we've talked a lot about that in the last couple of months at our house, like words within a family. Yeah. Sometimes they're a little harsher. And is that okay? Yeah. What does that indicate? In some regards, we can be honest with each other because we're safe people for each other if things are said in love that are true but are hard to hear. But when they're not said in love,
Yeah.
when they're said with that harsh tone, it can be no bueno. So
Yeah.
I
And I think
appreciate
with
that.
that being, oh, go ahead. Sorry.
No, I appreciate not just jumping into, here's my list of things of ways I think you could be living a better life, which is, kind of my go-to if I'm operating out of just my reaction, which gets back to what you said. Instead of responding, I'm reacting, and I'm reacting out of my own anxiety of, oh my gosh, you're wasting your life, or oh my gosh, you're depressed, and I need to help get you out of this. And so you need to follow my plan. And here's my plan. And why aren't you receiving it well? Dang it. So I appreciate
illusion that we have more control. Yeah. And I think with you
yeah.
saying that, one of the things that I'll encourage too is forgiveness. Like, there is such power. We're going to blow it. We're going to come in fast thinking this is my moment, and then realize our kid has shut down. There's been anger. Now I'm mad. I'm feeling offended because I had all these good ideas and now they're shut down, and you're not good, and we spiral so quickly. And I think then giving space as I've sort of watched older parents who have great relationships with their older kids, the only thread that I have found, they have parented differently. Some are quiet, some are loud, some are yellers, some are like always peaceful and kind. The one thread I have found with those that have really good, healthy relationships with their adult children is that they apologized, that they came back when they blew it, and they, hey, regardless of how you acted, I totally failed on that one. Like, will you forgive me for coming down on you, for being controlling? Like, I've got my own fear in this. I haven't done this before. Like, will you forgive me for the way that I responded to you? I'm so sorry. And leave it at that, and don't allow it to their lecture once they say yes or anything like that, but just asking forgiveness when blow up. Because gosh, I'm like, if there's one thing I want my kids to know how to do, is to repent, like to turn the corner when they've messed up, and allow there to be repair and starting again. And so we're going to be really good at that, because I give myself lots of opportunities to apologize.
Me too.
Yeah. Me right here.
Yeah.
I am with you. And boy, the last few months have given me lots of opportunity to say, well, I didn't do that well. And my older kids especially look at me like, really? Duh. Well, that's an obvious statement. And so to acknowledge it does add some humor and some levity, but it also acknowledges, like you said, I say over and over, I've never lived through a pandemic either. Like, we're trying to figure this out together. And then the older our kids are, the more we can start talking to them like equals and saying, well, what are your suggestions on how we handle this? What are your, and of course there's a way to say that that's very genuinely interested. And then there's a way that's very accusatory, like, really, what are your great ideas?
So what is your plan?
Yeah.
Well, but when we're affirming their good thoughts, right? Like, that's then affirming and empowering them for future great thoughts and future great decision making. And so it really is trying to get in that cycle of empowering our children and college is such a great time, because they're old enough to have that maturity and those thinking skills. I was just saying that last night to my daughter. She is a great thinker, and I trust her decision making. And that is the beauty of the college age, is that they become who they are, and then we can trust their decisions and then affirm those in them. And then they're empowered to make bigger decisions, because they will. Their college decisions are a small version of what the next season will hold for those bigger decisions.
Yes. And so many of those decisions are forged in the midst of mistakes and floundering and having hard days, and be like, man, I don't want to go through that again, and so offering support, assistance, truth, not fixing situations is probably the greatest challenge as a parent. From the time they're little to the time they're big, so yeah, absolutely. I love that. I love even how you affirmed her, like, you're a great thinker. It's not like you made a great decision, you're a great thinker. Can we affirm the process of becoming in our children and not just the outcomes? I think that's so significant. So yeah, I love that thought.
That's a good word. Can we jump in a little bit to this year's high school seniors? Because, these are the ones too that are feeling like, how am I ever supposed to make a future plan about next year? And how will I ever step on a campus to know if I even want to go there? Because I can't move. I can't even go to school, let alone to the next state over to visit this college. So can you speak a little bit into what can high school seniors expect this year, and how can we be coaching them as parents?
Yeah, absolutely. So I talked to one young woman who was an admissions, basically working in the admissions office. She's a class of 2020. So she just graduated, but was working with recruiting incoming freshmen for the last 9 months. And so we had a really cool conversation yesterday. And first and foremost, I mean, it's a privilege to be able to go visit a college campus. I mean, there's a lot of students who can't travel, can't get there. They're going blind, which is why for years, college campuses have made incredible virtual tours, and they're all over their websites. So do not disregard the fact that there's actually a lot of access. I mean, the first thing, I do a lot of college admissions with students. One of my favorite things to do, because they're getting to write about their lives, their identities, what they want to be about. I mean, it's a fun process to be in, and also to act as liaison between them and parents, because most kids don't want their parents editing them. That being said, there's so much that you can do to jump on a college website and do a virtual tour and kind of see the campus and what it looks like, and see some things. So I would say, just because the world is shut down a little bit doesn't mean that you need to negate the opportunity to dream and to figure things out. And there's no perfect campus. At every campus, there's a whole lot of people. Some you will love, some you will not. And there's opportunity. And so I think to take virtual tours, to call friends who are in college, and tell me about your experience. Tell me more about what you've seen and haven't seen. How has that looked? I mean, I think the power of just conversation is beautiful. For those that are athletes, make highlight films and start emailing coaches. Get some grit here. If you have a dream to play, you could walk on your first year and make your way, and there's incredible opportunity, even if your season is being shut down. I mean, there's people are taking video all the time. So grab some video from your coach, create a highlight reel, email some coaches, because coaches are in the same boat, right? The coaches and all the recruiting that's happening in colleges are like, what are we doing? So, and it's always been this way, that the students that are most proactive are, it's those are the coaches are going to bite on those that seem really interested and motivated. And so, it's going to look different. It's going to be unique, but here's a generation that's crazy technologically savvy. They can make reels of they'll be able to make things so quickly and put music to it. Use your sense of humor, your own personality, whoever you are, let that be drawn into the forefront. Email a coach and say, I don't know what the heck I'm doing, but I want to come play soccer for you. And so here's some highlights. Tell me what you need from me, because I think everyone's forging the new. And so I think that's where most often when we're in fear and overwhelm, creativity gets squelched. We creative. And so I think, again, as parents, as mentors, to ask questions, to laugh with our kids, to laugh with our students, watch a comedy show, plain one, but whatever you're comfortable with, watch something comedic, laugh together, and then say, hey, let's get creative. What are you dreaming about? Let's just dream. No holds barred. And what would you do? And the world is weird. What could you do using your skills? You're amazing. I mean, you're on that gaming system all the time. What would you create to get yourself in the place that you want to be? And so I think activating some humor and some creativity, and drawing kids out to dream. What has been life breathing for you? Whether you've already, happened upon that some things, or what have you hated? If you have a kid that hates sitting in a classroom and doesn't like to read, is college really the necessary next step? There's some really incredible opportunities, trade schools, apprenticeship schools. There's much out there. There's a lot of really interesting. I loved my college experience. It was phenomenal. It was expensive. There's a lot of really interesting opportunity out in the world, and we can learn grit and relational, just beautiful things, leadership, all sorts of things, without necessarily going right off to a four-year university. Gap years are underrated. I think a gap year can be a really beautiful thing. Working for a time and developing some of your interests and things. So, I think there's more than we think there is in terms of opportunity, but it does take activating some of those questions and curiosity and creativity for kids. So
I really like that. I really like that. And even their education, if they do take a break and do some other things, maybe it'll mean more when they actually do go back and have new information that informs a new motivation for school. So
Absolutely.
it's just, I think we do get fearful, as Alex, you were talking about too, just we do get fearful about those next steps, and we want the best for our children. It's coming from a good motivation. It just sometimes has the wrong outcome, right? Of how it comes out, because we let that fear get the best of us. And then instead of trusting God's plan for them, that it may look differently than ours. And I think there's always that concept of parent the child you have, not the child you were. And that's a hard one as parents, right? Because we think maybe our kids will take the same path, and they may not.
And that may not be personality. It just may be the state of the world, right? Like, have your kids have the college experience that the pandemic will allow, that that is completely out of our control. But here are the things we can control about those years coming up and the decisions around them. My daughter, just now at lunch, we got a flyer in the mail. She's a senior in high school. So every day she's the only one that gets mail. It's, all these college flyers. And here was a school that said, no application fee, no within 2 weeks, be the first, it was a lot of marketing stuff to try to get her to apply. It's a school she would never consider. And we live in Denver, it's in Kansas. I'm like, look at this. You haven't thought of this. This is amazing. Look at all the things they're trying to tell you. And she just looked at me like, Mom, it's in Kansas. I'm like, I know, but it's out of state technically, but you could get home if the dorm shuts down really easily. And they say you're going to be the first round of college scholarship looks. And anyway, it's just kind of generating that, like, the possibilities. This is opening doors that we did not consider before the pandemic. But now Kansas may be a great option.
I really like what you said, Emily, too, about just that creativity piece and really helping the kids to be creative. And I think as we look at, like, what are some of the benefits that are going to come out of COVID-19 for these classes that are going through 2020, 2021, let's hope we're not through into 2022, but especially for 20 and 21, these classes of kids, there's something special happening. I believe it. It's the upside down gospel concept, right? That there's always blessing from suffering, always. And so what are the kids really, how are they developing that initiative, that creativity, that adaptability, that fluidity that they would not have otherwise? So do you feel like that is happening already?
I think there's great opportunity there. I think there's great possibility. And I think so much of that is going to come from modeling it well and cultivating that, because I don't know that that's always been modeled well, to be really honest. Like, we're not very creative always. I mean, we often, like, this is what you do. Here's the American dream. Here's the order of things. And if you're on track, then you're doing great. And so I think for the first time, actually given this possibility of rerouting everything and really asking creative questions. And so I think those who are mentoring, who are parenting, we're asking the same questions. What's the way forward with my business? How are we doing this online? Like, think of all those things where you're trying to be creative and innovative, and maybe share some of that. Hey, I'm really stuck here. I mean, it'd be interesting to activate. We might not know a good answer for them, but you have a really interesting conundrum that you're in. And so share with those kids, like, hey, I'm stuck in this. What would you do? Ask. I mean, if we can't just be offering opportunities for solution, what if we're asking them? I have had some of the most incredible, thought-provoking, innovative ideas come from the 20-somethings. I mean, I think that I get to mentor, quote unquote. I don't even love that word. I love the term intergenerational friendship, because there is a mutuality. There is an energy and a creativity that comes my direction from them. And there is a sense of, wisdom and lived experience and perspective that I get to offer, but there's so much synergy there. And so I think we might be surprised if we were to share some of where we're stuck with the young people that we're with, and to trust them to speak into our lives, how that might energize them, motivate them in their own. I mean, I think about one of the first jobs that I got right out of college, and this so wise, so brilliant, hired me to do consulting. And I mean, I look back, I'm like, what was he doing? I mean, he gave me the room in these small organizations, where we were doing consulting and I'm presenting things and feeling awesome. And I'm looking back, I knew nothing. And yet he trusted me with so much, and encouraged, empowered, and critiqued here and there, was very specific. It gave me so much courage. And I look back and think, man, he either was so brilliant or so stupid. And so I think that we can activate that in young people around us, by demonstrating, showing that we're also stuck in some ways and need some help. And so how are we modeling it? How are we encouraging it? But I really do think there's there's this great sifting that is happening in this time, for us to actually live in a more kingdom-oriented way than we ever have, where there is a God who is with us, who has never left us, that at every moment we can ask, what is the next right thing? I can't see 5 steps ahead, but it's manna for today. And I think that idea of, we live in a world of abundance. We have enough, not more than enough. I don't know for tomorrow, but I know that today I have what I need in terms of wisdom, support, energy right around me. And I love in scripture when it says, the kingdom is at hand, reach out, take hold of it. It's so close. And yet we're gazing off into the future, paralyzed, when actually we have so much right in front of us for today, where we could walk in wisdom and in strength and in security, ironically. That today I have the ability to make good decisions for the people right in front of me and right around me, and to rewrite headlines, that I don't need to let the headlines of the papers determine my life, but girl is resilient and does not freak out when her children punch each other, victory today. I mean, what are the things that I will write that are victories for me today, even in the midst of an upside down world?
It really reminds me of James 1:5, which just, if you ask God for wisdom, he will give it to you. And so just continually asking God for that wisdom. And that's beautiful. I love what you just said. Emily, this has been such a great interview, so helpful and so full of truth. Thank you for sharing.
Yeah, it's been a gift to be with you guys. Thank you for your great questions and your care to just love people well and infuse them with energy and encouragement. So appreciate it.
So where can people find you if they want more of Emily Jamieson?
Yeah, on the Insta, it's at Emily K. Jamieson, I believe. And then I have a website, emilyjamieson.com, where a lot of my coaching and some speaking things are there, different things coming out. I'm doing a Zoom call tonight with a whole bunch of 20-somethings. So that's
I love it. So awesome. Well, thanks, Emily. And we wish you the best in everything you're doing right now.
Thanks, you too.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.